Interest theories, Keynes' liquidity preference theory. Keynes' definitions. So here we go through some of the answers to the questions. What is the definition of rate of interest? And then what are the motives behind Keynes' liquidity preference theory? So first we'll take a look at what is the definition of rate of interest. So the rate of interest as it is defined by Keynes is the reward for parting with liquidity for a certain duration of time. So if you have money, you keep the money, you do not invest the money in assets. That is the basis of the premises of rate of interest. The demand for money can be defined as a liquidity preference, which means the public desires to hold on to cash, even if there is no interest available to the public. Now, what are the motives behind Keynes' liquidity preference theory? Why the general public prefer cash to be with them? So as per Keynes' definition, there exist three different motives behind the desire of the public to hold on to liquid cash. The first one is transaction motive, next one is precautionary motive, and the third one is speculative motive. So in transaction motive, it is cash for current transactions. Or in other words, we can say the transaction motive or the income motive relates to the demand for money or a need for cash for current transactions of business exchange, and individuals hold on to the cash to meet or bridge the gap between their expenditure and the receipts of their income. Businessmen also has similar demand for cash for them to meet current needs like payments for their workers' wages, transport expenses, payments for raw materials, etc. So it's in fact actually cash for current transactions. So that is the transaction motive. Another motive of the public to hold on to cash is precautionary motive. So in order to cover for unforeseen contingencies, the public generally hold on to cash, and their desire for cash balance is because of this precautionary motive. Individuals sometimes hold cash for providing for illness, unemployment, meeting with expenses for accidents and unforeseen contingencies. Business also has similar demand, businessmen in general, for tiding over unfavorable conditions or to maybe gain from unexpected deals. So this is actually what it is. It is precautionary motive. In theory, Keynes holds the transaction motive and precautionary motive as relatively interest inelastic but highly income elastic. So everything depends upon the income of the public. So there's two motives of the public of holding on to cash, which is transaction motive and precautionary motive, is just because of the income which they gain, or it is highly income elastic. The more income they get, the more it is that they hold on to cash. That as per Keynes. And it is not actually interest elastic. It is not at all interest elastic. Now this would mean the amount of money held under these two motives is purely a function of income earned by individuals, business or the enterprise. Lastly, it is speculative motive. What it is investment in bonds with respect to changes in interest rate. Public would like to invest in bonds. So this relates to the desire to hold on to one's own resources in liquid form in order to take advantage of changes that affect in the future involving bond prices as well as rate of interest. Technically, bond prices and interest rates are inversely related to each other, which would mean if the bond price has to rise, the interest rate is expected to fall, making people to buy bond to sell when the prices actually rise. Also, if bond prices are to go down, the rate of interest is expected to rise because they are inversely related, prompting people to sell bonds so that they avoid the losses. So according to Keynes, this would mean the higher the interest rate, lower becomes the speculative demand for money, and lower the interest rate, higher becomes the speculative demand for money. So that is about speculative motive. So remember, for transaction motive, it is cash for current transactions. Precautionary motive, it is cash for unforeseen contingencies, and for speculative motive, it is investment in bonds with respect to changes in interest rate. That is the public, which actually who keep this motive is actually because of investments, because of their interest in investments in bonds with respect to changes in interest rate. Next, we'll take a look at what is supply of money and rate of interest. So what is supply of money? The total quantity of money in a country is termed as supply of money. It depends upon, to a lot of extent, on the rate of interest, which means the supply of money is a function of rate of interest. Yet it is a fact that money supply ideally is to be fixed by the monetary authorities. Hence, the supply curve of money is perfectly inelastic and is represented as a straight line, vertical straight line in the diagram. So we'll just take a look at the diagram where we actually see how we determine the rate of interest. So here there are three things which you have to understand. One is the demand for money, the other one is supply of money, and the last one is the equilibrium. So the amount of money is actually plotted in the x-axis, interest rate is plotted in the y-axis. If M1 is amount of money, M1 is actually, it is indicated by this point. So M1 is the amount of money, which means there is a greater demand for money when you compare it with M2. M2 is, there is a lot of money, so the demand is less. For M1, the demand is more. So let us just take a look at the diagram and explain how we determine rate of interest. So similar to the price of any product, for money, the interest rate is determined at some level where the demand for money equals supply of money. So when these two parameters, demand for money and supply of money, intersect, an equilibrium rate of interest is established. However, when there exists a deviation from the equilibrium position, an adjustment is brought in by way of rate of interest so that a new equilibrium is established. So here in this diagram, this curve is actually, this curvy line is actually the supply of money. There are different equilibrium points if you really notice, E1, E and E2. Each equilibrium point, we actually indicate the demand for money as M1, the demand is more, M1 is more actually, and then the rate of interest. So the ideal explanation is, generally when the supply of money is greater than demand of money, when the supply of money, if it is greater than the demand of money, the rate of interest will decline so that the equilibrium rate of interest remains established at a new value. Similarly, when the demand for money is greater than supply of money. So here, if you take M1, the demand is more. So if the demand of money is greater than supply of money, the rate of interest, because the demand of money is actually M1, which is only this much, and supply of money, it is actually this curve, so it is more. So when the demand of money is greater than supply of money, the rate of interest is increased because R1 is actually it's more. Rate of interest increases, establishing a new rate of interest at the equilibrium point, which is M1, which is E1 actually. So that is how we actually determine the rate of interest. Lastly, we'll see in conclusion what are some of the criticisms of Keynes' interest theory. Keynes' theory of interest is criticized for the fact that the rate of interest is not explained as a pure monetary phenomenon. This is because real forces like thrifty spending or savings by people or a productive capital play an important role in the determination of rate of interest. Also, liquidity preference is not the only factor governing rate of interest. There may be other factors that also affect rate of interest, namely investable funds and its availability. So this wraps up a session on Keynes' theory, which is liquidity preference theory. Thank you.